Dear students, how are you? Hope you are keeping fine. Today I am going to take a class for you, the honors first year students. This is on John Milton's famous sonnet on his blindness. But before going into the poem, let us know something about Puritanism and the political condition of England of that time. And the life of Milton was greatly influenced by the conflicting principles in religious and political matters of his time. Milton was a great Puritan. Puritans stood for the purest form of Protestantism. The Puritans were men of high principles. They sought to simplify the strict customs of religion. They believed in a Christianity that recognized the supremacy of Christ alone, without any kind of intermediaries. They were rebels against all established authorities. And Oliver Cromwell was a great Puritan leader of that time. He was an English general and a great advocate of religious and personal liberty. In the civil war against the king, the Puritans gathered under his banner. For centuries, English people were wonderfully loyal to their kings, but their love for their personal liberty was even greater. At times, these two ideals went hand in hand, but more often they were in open strife, and a final struggle for supremacy was inevitable. By the act of the Parliament, the king had assumed the divine right to rule his fellow men, but by the same divine right, the king began to ignore the Parliament which had created him. So, in the struggle for supremacy, the Puritans overthrew the corrupt monarchy, beheaded Charles I, and established the Commonwealth under Cromwell. Cromwell ruled England as Lord Protector from 1653 until his death in 1658, and restoration of Charles II in 1660 put an end to Puritan period. Now we'll know briefly about John Milton's life. John Milton is known as one of the very greatest and most influential English poets. He ranks with Chaucer and Shakespeare. He wrote both poetry and prose, and in poetry he wrote pastoral, elegy, epic, drama, sonnet, etc. His earlier poetic works are L'Allegro, Spensereso, Comus, Lycidas, etc. His most famous and influential work is the epic Paradise Lost. It was published in 1667. In 1671 was published Paradise Regained, and a famous first tragedy, Samson Agnostis. Areopagitica is his best prose work. In it, he strongly advocated the freedom of the press. Milton was born in Cheapside, London in 1608. His father was John Milton Sr., a prosperous merchant. His mother was Sarah Jeffrey Milton. Milton received an excellent education in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French, and Italian. His favorite subjects were music and literature. He began composing his own poetry at a young age. He attended St. Paul's School and then admitted into Christ's College, Cambridge. He received his MA degree and left the university in 1632. After that, he lived in Hammersmith for 3 years and later to Horton, where he spent his time in intense study and writing. In 1638, he made a tour to Italy, and this tour was very important for his literary development. But Milton's life changed completely with the coming of Civil War and Commonwealth. From private concerns, his attention was shifted to public activities. He left off writing poetry. He began to write pamphlets during the early 1640s. In his pamphlets, he opposed the rampant episcopal tyranny. Rampant কথাটার মানে হচ্ছে রেইনলেস, বলগাহীন. Episcopal, something related to church, directed by bishops, and tyranny কথাটার মানে হচ্ছে অত্যাচার, টর্চার. সে সময় যে ক্যাথলিক ধর্মের অধীনে যে কঠিন ধর্মীয় নিয়মকানুন ছিল সেগুলোর কথা এখানে, ধর্মীয় গোড়ামি ছিল সেগুলোর কথা এখানে বলা হয়েছে. He declared his Puritan allegiance and was against the Roman Catholicism, which was influential at that time. Allegiance কথাটা মানে হচ্ছে আনুগত্য, that is obedience. In 1642, he married his first wife, Mary Powell, but she left him shortly after the marriage. Later on, he had to marry 2 more times. In 1649, after the execution of the king, he became the Latin Secretary for Foreign Affairs under Cromwell. He wrote numerous pamphlets in support of the Republican cause and also against the church. Monarchy was restored in 1660. As a former member of the Commonwealth, his life was endangered. It was very likely that for his influential friends, he was spared of harsh punishment. He passed the remaining 14 years of his life in an obscure village in Buckinghamshire, London. He was completely blind since 1652. He devoted his whole time to poetry. His 2 nephews and his daughter Deborah would take dictation, correct copy, and read aloud. He died in November 1674 from consumption. His funeral was attended by his learned and great friends. So now let us read the poem and see its analysis. In the poem On His Blindness, Milton meditates on the devastating effect blindness had on his life and work. The first-person speaker in the poem makes us assume that the speaker is the poet himself. So, the title of the poem is On His Blindness, তার অন্ধত্বের বিষয়ে. When I consider how my light is spent, half my days in this dark world and white, the poet sometimes ponders on how he has lost his eyesight, and this misfortune has befallen him before half of his life is spent in this dark and white world. He equates his lost vision with light spent. And that one talent which is death to hide, lost with me useless. And that one talent here means his poetic talent. And his poetic talent, which can only be hidden by death, which can only be extinguished by death, is now with him in a useless position. Expression of his talent has been rendered impossible by his blindness, because there is no way for a blind man to put words to pace. So we see the tragic condition of Milton in his blindness. Though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker and present my true account. Bent means here determined. Therewith, that is, with that. But his soul, his heart is eager to serve God with his poetic talent. Why does the poet want to serve God with his poetic talent? Milton is a deeply religious poet. He feels a deep love and devotion for God. He wants to praise God in his poetry. And present my true account, lest he returning chide. See the lines. And present my true account, lest he returning chide. And the poet is eager to present his true account to God. তিনি কি কাজ করেছেন পৃথিবীতে সেটা তিনি ঈশ্বরের কাছে উপস্থাপন করতে চান, তিনি সে ব্যাপারে ব্যগ্র। He wants to present the performance of his duty to God. Because if he does not do his duty, God may try to rebuke him when he returns to God. হ্যাঁ, তিনি যখন মৃত্যুর পর ঈশ্বরের কাছে ফিরে যাবেন, ঈশ্বর তাকে ভর্ৎসনা করতে পারে। এর জন্য তিনি কি করেছেন সে বিষয়ে তিনি ঈশ্বরের কাছে সেটার হিসাব দাখিল করতে তিনি ব্যগ্র ছিলেন। কিন্তু তিনি তার চোখের দৃষ্টি হারিয়ে ফেলেছেন। এখন তিনি যে তার মূল যে কাজটা তিনি করতে চেয়েছিলেন, কবিতার সাহায্যে ঈশ্বরের যে বন্দনা গীত গাওয়া, সেটা তিনি পাচ্ছেন না। So he was in a very mental conflict. Doth God exalt day labor, light denied, I fondly ask. The poet is in an inner conflict, and in his confusion he foolishly asks himself, how can God expect day labor or duty from a man who has been denied the light of vision? A man who has no eyesight, he cannot serve God, he cannot do any work properly. But patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. But the speed of patience, কথাটা মানে কি ধৈর্য, এখানে ধৈর্যকে পার্সনিফাই করা হয়েছে। But the speed of patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. But the spirit of patience that is within the poet prevents that murmuring tone, prevents that complaining tone in the poet, and replies immediately, God doth not need either man's work or his own gift. God has no need for man's work or his talent. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. Here, yoke কথাটা মানে কি হচ্ছে? Yoke হচ্ছে জোয়াল। এটা একটা biblical image, and it is a kind of harness put on the oxen. And mild yoke means light burden. So here the spirit of patience is saying, the person who bears his mild yoke serve God best. That is, those best serve God who patiently bears God's will. Go to the next line. His state is kingly. That is, God is the King of kings, so God's state is naturally kingly. At God's thousands at his bidding speed and post over land and ocean without rest. And at God's will or order, thousands of angelic hosts speed and travel all over the earth all the time. Bidding means key order. Speed, they go very quickly. And post over the land and ocean. Post means travel over the land and ocean without rest, ceaselessly. They also serve, and the last line, they also serve who only stand and wait. So in the last line, we see that the poet resolves the conflict in the mind of the poet by saying, So the poet resolves the conflict in the last line by saying, those also serve God who only stand and wait. That is, there is more than one way to serve God. And patience is telling that his apparent inaction, the poet's apparent inaction caused by his blindness, can be a kind of service. In case of a blind man, it is only that he should bear his blindness patiently. So we see God has a master plan for everyone on earth. Even though Milton does not know why God has taken away his vision, he must learn to accept what is given to him. We know that this poem is a sonnet. Now let us examine the poem as a sonnet. What is a sonnet? Sonnet is a 14 lines poem of iambic pentameter linked by an intricate rhyme scheme. The word sonnet comes from sonetto, which means a little song. This sonnet form originated in Italy in 13th century It was developed by the great Italian poet Petrarch. In English, this form of poetry was widely modified by the Earl of Surrey and by William Shakespeare. Mainly, sonnets are divided into two types: Italian or Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean or English sonnet. The traditional subject of sonnet is love. Besides love, there are sonnets on religion, ethical themes, God, soul, country, death, etc. The sonnet is divided into two parts, octave and sestet. The first 8 lines of the sonnet are called octave, and the remaining 6 lines are called sestet. The octave introduces a theme or poses a problem, and in the sestet this theme or problem is resolved. In the sonnet on his blindness, the octave, that is the first 8 lines, poses the problem of Milton's blindness. And in the sestet, in the remaining 6 lines, the poet resolves the problem by pointing out that those also serve who only stand inward. That is, Milton should bear his blindness patiently. Though Milton chose the Italian form of sonnet, he did not blindly follow it. In the Italian sonnet, there is a clear-cut division between the octave and sestet. But in Milton's sonnet, the division between the two is not clear-cut. The syntax tends to overflow the division between the octave and sestet. For example, in the following lines, "Doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask, but patience to prevent that murmur soon replies." Here you see the octave ends with the word prevent, but the syntax of the sentence is not completed. The sentence flows on into the sestet. As for the meter, he has followed the traditional iambic pentameter of the Italian sonnet form. Like in Italian sonnet, the octave rhymes ABBA, ABBA, and the sestet rhymes CDE, CDE, and there are a good number of variations here. The poet has personified patience. He has given patience the human quality to speak. The phrases like dark world and white, death to hide, lost, stand and wait are quite in tune with Milton's loftiness of style. Finally, we can say that On His Blindness is about the poet's mourning over the loss of his eyesight to his submission and acceptance of God's will. So, beyond the surface matter, the poem is an exposition on the nature of service to God. This is all for today, dear students. Keep fine.